Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at some of the guns that are coming up for sale in their April of 2018 premiere auction. And today we have a semi-auto Portuguese AR-10 to take a look at. And there's a bit of a backstory to this. So first off, you might suspect that semi-auto AR-10s are probably not that hard to come by because of course the AR-10's made in the US, made by Armalite. Well, there are a whole bunch of misnomers in there. Only, if I remember correctly, 47 AR-10s were actually manufactured in the United States, in Costa Mesa, California. The actual production contract for the military AR-10s that were purchased went to a company called Artillerie-Inrichtingen in the Netherlands. And so it is actually the Netherlands that produced all of the military select fire AR-10s that are out there. And by the way, these were all basically select fire guns, with the exception of a few prototypes and experimental models. So the AR-10 was adopted not by the US, that's a story for a whole nother video, but the AR-10 was adopted by a number of countries, starting with a couple of small ones. Sudan, Guatemala, Cuba, and then most notably Portugal adopted the AR-10. They were testing it against the FAL and the HK-G3 and really liked the AR-10. It has a lot of things going for it in the same way that the AR-15 does. It's a very light rifle. Even in the Portuguese, this is basically the last pattern of the original AR-10, and it's the heaviest. And even in this configuration, it's something like 7.5 pounds. Really quite light. It is quite controllable for a full auto 308 because of this inline design of the stock, just like the AR-15. And so the Portuguese recognized all these things and they really liked the rifle. The first thing they did with the first guns they got was outfit their basically elite airborne troops with AR-10s, and they were planning to adopt the AR-10 as a standard rifle for the entire rest of their military when international relations got in the way. So at this time, we're talking the early 1960s here, the Portuguese airborne troops were heavily involved in trying to quell unrest in Angola. And their methods were getting them some international pushback. And in 1961, the Netherlands decided that for reasons of international diplomacy, it was going to try and separate itself from Portugal a bit. And one of the things it did was shut off all Dutch exports of firearms to Portugal. And that shut down sales of the AR-10 to Portugal. So the Portuguese got several thousand of these guns, but they didn't get enough to ever go through with the plan of adopting them for the entire military. So the Portuguese, and they also, by the way, never got a whole lot of spare parts. When the Dutch contract was shut down, Artillerie-Inrichtingen at the same time was pretty much cut off from manufacturing this gun. They made a lot of magazines, but they didn't make very many spare parts at all. So what this meant is that those few countries that had acquired AR-10s for their militaries, Sudan, Guatemala, Portugal, they used them pretty hard and for a long time. Most of the guns ended up pretty rough. By the end, of course, they were going through some of the poorer conditioned guns to scrape together parts to repair some of the other guns to keep as many going as they could. And ultimately, the inability to get parts or new guns led to these rifles being replaced in service in every country that had originally adopted them. By the 1980s, a lot of these guns had been located by American import-export firms, and a bunch of them came into the United States as parts kits. Now, of course, these were made outside of the US. They weren't imported until after 1968. And so as such, they were not able to be registered as legal machine guns or as transferable machine guns. So the vast majority of them came in as parts kits with cut receivers. There are a few full auto ones around that were imported as dealer samples, but the vast majority came in as parts kits. And that provided, well, a bit of a conundrum to the market because a parts kit is fine and cool and all, but of course everybody who bought a parts kit, and we're talking several thousand, 3,000 parts kits total, most of them Portuguese, but there were some Sudanese guns that came back into the US, there were some Guatemalan guns that came into the US. Most of the people who bought these parts kits did so because they wanted to have functional, fireable AR-10s. So a number of companies came up with options for receivers, because that was the problem. The lower receiver on the AR-10, just like the AR-15, is the registered firearm. And so with the parts kit, what you're missing is the lower receiver. Now, this particular one was made by a company called Sendra. And well, why don't we take a closer look at it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Sendra. So the problem with this project of how do we get AR-10 receivers was the same in the 80s as it is today. Namely, there isn't a huge market. No one's going to be making a lot of these. And so there aren't any big companies willing to put in the capital, like, say, Artillerie-Inrichtingen, to actually tool up and properly make receivers. So at first, a couple of different companies came up. Some of them used steel, some of them used aluminum. At least one company actually made the receiver in two halves and then welded them together. And then Sendra was one of the last. And Sendra was started by a guy named Jerry Drasen, in 1985. And he produced really what are, without any dispute, the best of the AR-10 receivers. These are actually aluminum forgings that are milled, 70-75 aluminum, forged and then milled to the, well, obviously all of the correct profiles. His receivers were made so that they could be installed on either Portuguese or Sudanese parts kits, because there is a bit of a difference between the two. The AR-10 pretty much went through little upgrades and changes in every contract that it went through. And the Portuguese was the last major contract with the best actual firearm, the most product improved version of the AR-10. So you'll see there the receiver markings. AR-10 originally, of course, the original receiver would have had a big triangular AI mark and an Armalite patent on it, et cetera, et cetera. These are marked AR-10. Serial number here is 23,009. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. When Sendra was making these receivers, you could actually get them to match the serial number from your parts kit, which, unlike the other AR-10s, the Portuguese guns were actually serialized on their upper receiver. So this was Portuguese gun number 7915. That obviously wasn't matched on this lower receiver. They didn't make 23,000 of these. That's more than the total number of AR-10s made. My understanding is there were somewhere between 500 and 2,000 of these Sendra lowers made. So why that particular serial number, I don't know. Because these are semi-auto only, there is a stop on the selector switch. And of course, the hole and the internal receiver accommodations for the full auto bits are not in there. A couple of the neat features of the Portuguese gun, we do have a windage adjustable and elevation adjustable rear sight. The elevation is adjustable by range, so 300, 400, 500, and we can go back down to 1 or 2, 100, 200. So you have a fairly simple, easy to use rear sight. One of the most distinctive features of the original AR-10s is, of course, the trigger-shaped charging handle up here, which is the AR-10 came before the AR-15. So this set the design for the original, very early AR-15s. The whole reason for this handle is really not so much as a carry handle, but rather as a guard and a protector for the charging handle, as well as an elevated position for the rear sight, so that you can have the stock in line with your shoulder. Now, the charging handle on these is, interestingly, it is also a hold open, and it is a non-reciprocating charging handle. So in order to use it, you actually have to push it down like so, and then you can slide it back. If you don't push it down, it doesn't move. And while I can't really show you this because the bolt's under spring pressure, as long as you're holding it down, it does also act as a forward assist. So you can use it to push forward on the bolt if you want to. You'll also note that there is a dust cover inside. It's a telescoping dust cover inside that channel, and it is held within the receiver itself, the upper receiver. Some of the earlier versions of the AR-10 had a charging handle that actually came out the back of the upper receiver, and that was one of the improvements of the Portuguese model. And then out here on the front, we have a couple other neat features. The bayonet lug is on the top of the barrel assembly, kind of like the G3. We have an adjustable gas regulator here, which included a position for off for grenade launching, because these are set up. You can see when you see these rings on a muzzle device, that's there for rifle grenades, which were a popular and useful military tool, and they were equipped on these, as well as I believe some other original AR-10s. The muzzle device on the Portuguese guns is this big 3-port open compensator. I don't know if you can see it through here, but probably can't. But the front of this is actually threaded on the inside, so you can screw in a blank adapter as well. And of course, these predate the use of either a brass deflector or a forward assist. Of course, you don't need the forward assist here because it's built into the charging handle. So this particular gun is kind of typical of what you will find today for an original AR-10. It's a semi-auto Sendra receiver. It is an original, in this case, Portuguese parts kit, which is by far the most common. This one actually has a pretty good bore, which is a bit unusual. A lot of them have bores that are just totally shot out from hard use in Angola. And then this one also has all replacement furniture. So normally these would be Bakelite parts, brown Bakelite, the grip, the stock, and the handguards. The handguards being 2-piece originally. These have all been replaced by wooden furniture, which is done largely because that Bakelite isn't the most durable stuff ever. And 50 years now after these were manufactured, 60 years actually, almost, they tend to break a lot. They tend to crack. And a lot of guys, if you plan to shoot one of these guns, a lot of guys will just replace the furniture right off the bat. A lot of them have broken furniture, and so people will replace those with wooden furniture to have a complete gun. And that has been done on this particular example. So as it is, this is kind of like the ideal AR-10 to use as an actual shooting firearm. Because of the new furniture, it doesn't quite look exactly right for the purist collector. And of course, it has a replacement semi-auto receiver. But for the person who's interested in actually shooting, this is about the best configuration to have. So if that person is you, take a look at the description text below. You'll find a link there to Rock Island's catalog page for this particular gun. You can take a look at their pictures, their description, their price estimates, all the other information you would need. Place a bid either here at the auction live or through their website. Thanks for watching.